Hey everybody, Eva Zacharia here for Weddings Made Easy, and today we're taking an Irish wedding ceremony tradition and modernizing it for your reception. Irish brides would carry a horseshoe down the aisle for good luck, but I'm turning one into a guest book that you can hang in your home and make it look beautiful. After you watch the video, be sure to click the link in the video description for the blog post for a great idea on how to hang this up with your wedding photos. You can find the full supplies list on the blog, which is linked in the video description. Here's what my surface looks like for this DIY. I have paper bags from the grocery store that I just cut open and a cutting mat. We'll be using an X-Acto knife, so find what position works best and most safely for you, standing at a table, sitting in a chair, or sitting on the floor. I use 20 by 30 foam board for this, but I also have a sheet of 16 by 20 to show you what that would look like. The first step is to draw your horseshoe, and here's a fun household trick. Use a belt to help you. I'm sketching by hand on my foam board or foam core. Because I want my horseshoe to be larger than the belt, I move it down as I go. You can also cut a piece of yarn or string for this. If easier, you can make your final line a different color also. I also want to make sure the tops are aligned and my horseshoe is pretty much symmetrical. After I sketch the first side, I use a ruler to make sure my horseshoe is the same width. I'm going to make this one 3 inches wide. Sketch lightly so you don't pierce through the foam board. Now comes the fun part, cutting out your horseshoe. Take your time with this. You want to make sure that you're cutting safely with your X-Acto knife. I very slowly run the X-Acto knife across the top and bottom from the horseshoe to make a smaller board. Cut away from you. This cut can be a little rougher, just bend these parts off. Then I start cutting the horseshoe. I cut around a section of my line. And don't worry about putting the X-Acto knife all the way through the foam board the first time. Repeat the process until you get the cut through the foam board. Something you may run into is when you go to move a chunk out, you might see you haven't cut all the way through. Just give it another cut or two, it's totally fine. I do this in sections and cut small pieces off as I go so that the foam board doesn't get in my way. Watch your fingers, I cannot stress that enough. Repeat the process of cutting a little bit at a time. This takes a while, so don't be discouraged and don't do this when you are in a hurry. It took me about 30 minutes in real time to cut this out, and I have experience crafting. So budget enough time. I've posted the entire video of me cutting this out and linked it below in case you want to watch the whole thing in real time. Once I have the entire outer layer cut out, I take out a large portion of the center, again for ease of cutting this out. Follow the same steps you did for the outer portion. Cut a section and go over your line several times. The curviest parts are very tricky. I also do those in sections. After I cut out the entire horseshoe, I flip it over. Super carefully, I trim any excess. This side is going to be the front. So once you're done trimming, flip it back over to make the slits for your ribbon, which you're going to use to hang this up after your wedding. If you don't feel comfortable creating these smaller cuts, you can always hot glue your ribbon to the back of the horseshoe instead. I make small rectangles here because they're easier to cut than circles when I'm using the X-Acto knife. Make your first few cuts and flip your horseshoe to the front. Complete the cut here so that you can make sure you like the way the rectangle looks and you can see that you're cutting it out nicely. And voila! Before we get to painting, I just want to show you one thing. When it comes to scissors versus X-Acto knife here, this is why a pair of scissors won't work for this craft. Foam board is just not its friend. You'll get creases and it's difficult to cut anything other than a small portion of a straight line. X-Acto is the way to go with this material. And as I said before, just be careful and cut slowly and watch your hands, watch your fingers. Now that our beautiful horseshoe is cut out, let's add some color. I've chosen sage for my horseshoe, but you can use any color you like. Just make sure that you choose a color light enough for your friends and family to be able to sign over it at your wedding. I've also kept my paper bag set up to catch any spillover paint, but I've taken out my cutting mat. Any paintbrush will work for this, but I use foam brushes because the paint goes on smoothly and they are super inexpensive. Squeeze your paint into a cup or onto a paper plate or a paint palette and just paint back and forth. I paint the sides first and let them dry. It really only takes about 10 minutes. Then paint the top, let it dry, and repeat that same process for a second coat. You can also paint the back of your horseshoe if you want to. Now we're ready to embellish. There are a few different ways to add text to your horseshoe. My trick for 3D text is fabric paint because you can paint it on as thickly as you want. I lightly pencil in my letters, then erase them just enough that I can still see them. If handwriting won't fly for you, either buy letter stickers at your local craft store and use those, or buy small wooden letters, paint them, and hot glue them on. If you do use the fabric paint, let it dry for 24 hours at least. I'm using gold glitter because I love it. You can also erase any extra pencil marks after your paint has dried completely. I'm adding mine and Jason's initials and our wedding date here, but you can do whatever you want. You could add a phrase like lucky in love, you could put your first names, you could put your married name. The choice is yours. Personalize it to you and your future spouse. Once it is completely dry, you may find that you have some air bubbles. Weigh them down overnight with heavy boxes or books, but make sure whatever you are using has a flat bottom so you don't make an imprint in your horseshoe. You will likely find that as the paint dries, the horseshoe curls up a bit. I actually really love this look because I feel like it gives the horseshoe a more authentic feel. To further combat any pesky air bubbles and make your horseshoe feel even more symmetrical, add some trim. I love this thin trim with some iridescence. Carefully and slowly, use a hot glue gun to glue the trim down. Start at the top of the horseshoe since any seams will be covered by the ribbon you hang it up with. Take a thick ribbon in the color or pattern of your choice. I have one that's white and gold. Because we're using a single strand, I recommend using hot glue to attach the ribbon to the back of your horseshoe so you don't get an unwanted lean from a knot when you hang it on the wall. Use one strand and glue it to each side if you don't want to have a bow in the middle, but if you do want to have a bow in the middle, pull your ribbon a little bit longer and use 2 different strands. Eyeball this and make the ribbon as long as you need for your horseshoe to hang at the length you want it to be. Here's how to tie the bow. Once you make your bow and trim your ribbon, put clear nail polish across the cuts to prevent fraying. Next, prepare to bring this to your wedding. Paint a piece of your extra foam board. It can be as tiny as one of the ones you cut out. Let that dry and then use the pens and markers and see how they look. Permanent markers work well for signing this, as should many other markers, but test your writing materials out before bringing them to your wedding reception. And just a reminder to head to the blog post linked in the video description for how to hang this on your wall. Thanks so much for watching. For more crafts, go to MadeEasyDIY.com. Head to @WeddingsMadeEasy on Instagram and like and subscribe on YouTube. Happy crafting!